kick us off with some of the technical information that everybody needs to know.
Thank you, Judy. Welcome, everyone. We are
Xin chào
offering
mừng quý khách.
interpretation for this meeting
Chúng tôi
in
cung cấp phiên
Portuguese,
dịch
Haitian Creole,
trực
Spanish,
tuyến nhiều ngôn
Cantonese, and
ngữ.
Vietnamese.
Nếu quý vị
And
nào muốn
so
nghe
if
thông dịch
you
ngôn ngữ của
would
mình,
like
vui lòng nhấn vào
interpretation,
biểu
hopefully
tượng
you can
phiên
read the
dịch nơi
screen to
mũi tên
find
màu
your
xanh lá
spot
cây
by
trở
clicking on
đến
the
và
interpretation
chọn
button
ngôn ngữ
and
của
selecting
mình.
the appropriate language. You
Đối
can go
với
to the next
quý
slide.
vị khác, bạn không cần phải nhấn vào phần tiếng Anh, chỉ cần
We
chờ
are
nghe bạn
recording this
đang ở thôi.
webinar. At this time, interpreters, please do press the record button in your room, and we will be posting the recording
Phần
and
trình bày
the
của hội
slides are
thảo
actually
trên
already
web này
up
được ghi
at
lại và bản ghi âm sẽ được đăng trực tuyến
mass.gov/330CCP.
ngay lập tức.
The
Chúng tôi
lines
yêu
will
cầu
remain
bạn tiếp
muted
tục
during the
tắt tiếng và
presentation,
tắt
but
máy
we'll
ảnh
be
cho đến
unmuting
khi kết
folks
thúc bài thuyết trình.
to provide
Sau đó
oral
chúng
comments
tôi sẽ
after the
lắng nghe những
presentation.
góp ý
If you would
của
like to
bất kỳ
provide
ai muốn
comments,
nói lên ý
we're
nghĩ của
going to be
mình.
asking you to raise
Nếu
your
bạn có
hand.
câu
So if
hỏi
you
để
know you
làm
want
cho
to
rõ
provide
ràng hoặc
comments,
có vấn
feel
đề
free to
hậu
raise your
cần,
hand at
bạn
any
có thể
time, and
cho
we'll
chúng tôi biết trong
walk
hộp
you
trò
through that when we
chuyện.
get to that
Chỉ
portion of
cần
the
nhấp vào
presentation.
biểu tượng
If
trò
you have
chuyện
any
ở cuối
clarifying
màu hình,
questions or
nơi
logistical
mũi tên màu
issues,
xanh
please
lá
type it
cây
into the chat box, and we will try
trỏ
to
đến,
address it
hộp trò
as we
chuyện
move
của bạn
through.
sẽ xuất hiện.
But with
Sau
that,
đó, bạn có
if we can go to
thể
the
nhập
next
câu
slide.
hỏi hoặc vấn đề của mình và
I'd
nhấn
like to welcome Judy
Enter
Chang,
trên bàn phím
Undersecretary of
để gửi.
Energy, to share with us about the plan, and apologies for the
Cô
date. This is the March
Julie sẽ
15th
là
version,
người chia
the
sẻ
evening
với
version,
chúng
sorry,
ta về
we didn't fix this title
cái
slide.
không khí sạch
But take it away,
và môi
Judy.
trường cho năm 2030.
Thank you
Xin
very
mời cô
much,
Judy.
Claire, and thank you everybody for joining us this evening for this webinar. And first of all, I'd like to say that I appreciate
Xin
your
chào quý
patience
vị
with
và
the
cảm ơn tất
rescheduling of
cả
the
quý vị
date
đã
and the
tham gia
time of the
hội thảo trực
webinar.
tuyến trên trang
We
web
had
này của chúng
tried to
tôi
schedule
và
this
cảm ơn
earlier in the
sự kiên nhẫn
year,
của quý vị đối
but
với
our
thời
whole
điểm
team
và thời
was actually
gian
working hard
lịch
through
trên
after
lịch
December
này.
30
Chúng tôi
when
hy
we
vọng
first
đã cho
published
quý vị
the
thêm thời
report
gian để
to
xem
work
xét và
with
xử
our
lý kế hoạch tạm
legislatures
thời
on the
năm
proposed climate bill,
2030
and
được
I will
công
talk
bố vào
a
ngày
little bit more
30
about that
tháng
later.
12 năm
So I
ngoái.
hope that this has given you additional time to review and process the information in the interim 2030 Clean Energy Climate Plan that was released last year on December 30th. So I'm going to first spend some time to present the high-level findings and in the CECP, the Clean Energy Climate Plan, and then we will have a listening session where we can hear everybody's comments. A number of people have already asked about the current climate bill that's in the legislation, in the legislature being debated, and its potential impact on this 2030 plan. As you probably know, that the amended bill is currently still being debated for consideration, and therefore we don't actually know the exact way that the final bill will affect the CECP, but we certainly look forward to a continued dialogue with our legislators and the stakeholders as we work to achieve the common goals. Governor Baker has returned the climate legislation with a series of key targeted amendments. Most of those amendments were accepted, but it's still being debated in the legislature. He definitely looks forward to signing the amended bill. I am optimistic that we can work through the differences and get to an agreement on the final bill, which I believe will maximize Massachusetts' ability to achieve net zero emissions by 2050 in the most cost-effective way and in the most equitable way, and mark a significant milestone for the Commonwealth's leadership on climate change. I will summarize our approach and strategies for aggressively reducing the greenhouse gas emissions in the next decade, for this next decade, to position ourselves to achieve the net zero emissions by 2050. And then I will listen to the oral comments that you may have on the plan. The last decade, and especially the last year, years
mục tiêu này phù
really
hợp
has been an
với khoa
exciting
học nói
time
rằng
here in
chúng ta cần
Massachusetts
phải
as
đạt
we
tới mức,
make significant
nhưng chắc chắn
progress
đó là một
in
điều đầy tham vọng và
safeguarding
chúng tôi biết
Massachusetts
sẽ cần
environmental
tất cả các
resources
công cụ
while
có
taking
thể đạt
aggressive
được mục
action on
tiêu
climate
đó.
change
Do
while
đó, lý do
preparing
tại sao
for its
EEA tham gia
inevitable
vào một quá
impact
trình lộ
on our
trình dựa trên
communities.
khoa học toàn
Massachusetts has
diện để
always
vạch
been a
ra
leader
các lộ trình
on
khả dụng nhằm
environmental
đạt được mục
issues,
tiêu dẫn
responsibility,
đầu
and
về
governance,
khí
and I'm
hậu quốc
extremely
gia này.
proud to be part of this team and making an effort taking the next step. Next slide, please. This slide just depicts what it means to get to net zero by 2050. Now, before the pandemic disrupted our schedules and our lives, 2020 was already, we were starting with really strong activities, setting the right course to combat climate change. Governor Baker at that time set an aggressive target for Massachusetts to achieve net zero emissions by 2050. That target is consistent with the science where we need to be, and it is ambitious, and it is going to be difficult but achievable. I'm also glad to see that many other jurisdictions have followed suit, and I think this is a recognition of saying that this is what the science says we need to be as society. Which is why EEA, the Energy and Environmental Affairs team here, is engaged in a comprehensive science-based roadmap analysis. We want to map out the pathways available to achieve this climate goal. Next slide, please. This on the slide, you see the cover of really 2 years of hard work from many team members to look at our decarbonization roadmap. Of course, we recognize that the ability to solve climate crisis requires state leadership. We know the cost of inaction could be devastating to our economy, our health, and our environment, which is why we are taking a leadership role as the first state in the nation to release a comprehensive study to achieve the net zero emissions by 2050. This study is an economy-wide study. This means that we looked at every sector of the economy and tried to understand how to bring us all together to a net zero emissions by 2050. Now, the 2-year analysis used the best models and the analytical tools available to explore, and it involved people who have done this kind of analysis for other countries and looked at it from a global perspective and really dived in deep on every sector in detail. And it analyzed the steps that the Commonwealth and the region needs to take to achieve our goal of net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050, while maintaining a healthy, equitable, and thriving economy in Massachusetts. Now, this long-range study and analysis is informing our effort for the next decade. The reason I lead in with this whole decarbonization roadmap study is because it is a scenario-based approach to look into the future and look at different scenarios, how we might achieve net zero by 2050. And the reason it's important to look at the longer term is because the next decade is really the stepping stone to the longer term. And we also can't wait until the last decade or 2040s to achieve what we set for ourselves in 2050. Even though 2050 sounds like a long time or a long, far away time frame, we actually need to act now in this particular moment, in this particular decade. So if you haven't already, I do encourage you to review the roadmap study, the 2050 roadmap report, which is posted online at the link at the top of the slide. Also posted with the roadmap are 6 technical reports
kỹ thuật từ nghiên cứu
that
lộ
provide
trình
much
năm
detail behind the
2050 này
analysis
cung
for
cấp
each
chi
sector,
tiết
as well as the
đằng sau
analysis of
phân tích của
economic
chúng
and
tôi
health
về
impacts
từng lĩnh vực
from
chính,
decarbonization
cũng như
pathway to
phân tích các
2050.
tác động kinh tế và
If
sức
nothing
khỏe
else, these
từ các
technical
con đường
appendices
khử
provide a
carbon
lot of information. It's a
ở
great
năm 2050.
resource for people who want to learn more about how to really work together to decarbonize our economy.
Và đó là những cái
Next
nguyên liệu để
slide,
cho
please.
chúng ta
through this roadmap analysis, we
lộ trình những phát
are
hiện chính.
focused on making sure that while
Trong
we
khi
keep our
chúng
options
tôi
open, we also need to act now,
phân tích nhiều con
because
đường và
many
vấn đề
opportunities
mở các
only
tùy
occur
chọn của
several
mình,
times
chúng
in the
tôi
next
nhận thấy rằng các
3
con đường
decades,
dẫn
and we
đến
need to have a
hiệu
plan
quả
to
về chi phí
understand
và
how we
những
achieve
rủi
them.
ro thấp
And
nhất đến các
overall, the
yếu tố
lowest
cốt lõi.
risk
Chia
pathway
sẻ
to
net
net
zero,
zero
không khí
has
sạch
a
sau
few
đây.
elements. First, a balanced clean energy portfolio anchored by significant
danh
amount
mục
of
năng lực
offshore wind
sạch
resources as well as
cân bằng
solar
được neo
resources.
giữ bởi một nguồn
More
dốc gió quan
interstate
trọng ngoài
transmission
khơi.
lines to allow us to access the diverse renewable generation and clean
Nhiều đường
energy in
truyền
our
liên bang
neighboring
hơn để
states
cho
as
phép
well
chúng
as
tôi
in
tiếp
Canada.
cận sự
And this
đa
does
dạng
not
của thế hệ
necessarily
tái tạo
mean
ở các bang
new
khác và ở
transmission lines,
Canada.
but it
Điện
may
khí
mean
lan tràn rộng
upgrading our
rãi,
existing
phương tiện giao
system to
thông và
access
nhiệt
to a
xây
diverse
dựng để cắm
portfolio of
vào
clean
việc
energy
tạo
that
ra
we
năng
can
lượng sạch.
access to. And
Giảm
widespread,
chi
the
phí
third
bằng
thing is
cách thay
widespread
thế cơ sở hạ
electrification of
tầng năng
transportation
lượng khi
and
cần
building
thay
heat
thế.
so that we can plug basically our transportation system and our buildings to that clean energy system or clean electricity system.
Mô hình hóa và
And then
các giả định
lastly, but
cho
most
lộ
importantly,
trình
reduce costs by replacing energy infrastructure when it is up for replacement. This means that we only have so many opportunities to
Cái này có nghĩa là
change
chúng ta chỉ
people's
có
purchasing
những bao nhiêu
decisions
cơ
to
hội
make sure
và để
that
thay
when a
đổi
car is at its end of life, that's an opportunity for people to purchase a new car. And how do we create
mô
incentives
hình
for
hóa và
people
các
to
giả định cho lộ
transition
trình
to
2050
electric
chủ yếu được
vehicles
xây dựng dựa
at
trên
an
hiểu
affordable
biết
level?
trước đại dịch COVID xảy ra
The
về
modeling
các
and the
xu hướng
assumptions for the
và
2050
động lực.
roadmap were mostly built off a pre-COVID understanding of the trends and the dynamics of our economy. Certainly, we have learned how to live and in this strange environment, and
Nhưng chúng
you know,
tôi
we
đã
can
biết
all
và
assess that
và
there are
đang
some
sống
potential
những tác
long-lasting
động lâu
impacts,
dài
and
từ đại dịch
particularly
này
the way
vẫn
we
cần
work,
được xác định
particularly the way
khi các
we
tác động và
transport
xu
ourselves.
hướng lâu dài trở
And
nên
while
rõ
we haven't
ràng.
really
Chúng tôi
conducted
sẽ
an
điều chỉnh
in-depth
kế hoạch
analysis
của
and to
mình nếu
incorporate any
có
of these
những vấn đề
lessons
cụ
learned
thể
or
liên
best
quan đến khí
practices
thải
during
và
the
thay
COVID
đổi
timeframe
từ khi
into the
đại dịch COVID
2050
xảy ra.
roadmap.
Chúng tôi rất hoan
We
nghênh
are
quý vị
interested in
nào
that impact
nói
and the
cho chúng
trends,
tôi biết và
so
nhận
that
xét của
if
quý vị về
we,
kế
after
hoạch
analyzing
tạm
the
thời
impact of
cho
COVID
năm
and understanding what the
2030.
longer lasting impact would be, we would try to incorporate that in a future clean energy climate plans. Next slide, please.
Kế hoạch
So
năng lượng sạch và
to
phát
put us in
thải
the best
giới hạn
position to achieve the net zero by 2050, the
để đưa
Secretary
chúng
of
ta
Energy
vào
and
vị trí
Environmental
tốt nhất
Affairs
có thể
had
đạt
set an
được net
emissions limit
zero
of
năng lượng sạch vào năm
45% below
2050.
1990
Bộ
levels
trưởng đã
by
đặt ra giới hạn
2030.
phát thải
This strikes the
45%
best
dưới mức
balance and the right balance
1990
because it
và
sets us
năm
on a course to hit
2030.
our net
Điều
zero
này đạt
goals
được sự
while
cân bằng
balancing the
phù hợp
economic
vì nó đặt
costs.
chúng ta vào con
Now,
đường
this
tốt nhất
target
để
is
có thể
ambitious,
được mục tiêu
and
net
it is
zero không
probably
khí
the
sạch của
most
chúng ta,
ambitious
đồng
in
thời
the
cân đối
state's
các chi
targets
phí kinh
across the
tế.
country. And it will allow us, though, to take advantage of end-of-life stock turnover.
Cũng
This is when
đầy
a car needs
tham
to be
vọng
replaced,
như bất
as I
kỳ
just
mục tiêu
mentioned, or a
phát thải
furnace
nào
needs to
của
be
nhà nước và
replaced
cho
at
phép
its
chúng
end
ta
of
tận
life.
dụng lợi thế của
This is the
việc
best
luân
time to
chuyển
make the
hàng
replacements
tồn và
because
gần
those
cuối
decisions
phần.
will need to
Đó
be
là
made
thời
anyway,
điểm một
and we
chiếc
hope that
lò,
people could
một chiếc xe
transition to
hơi chẳng
a
hạn
use of a different
và
technology
đã cũ và
possibly,
cần
so
được
that
thay
we can
thế.
use clean electricity to power both our transportation and our heating for the buildings.
Điều này sẽ giúp chúng
It
ta
gives us
giảm lượng
time
khí
and
thải xuống tối
flexibility
đa mà
to
chúng ta
develop new
cần,
markets
trong
and
khi
take
vẫn
advantage
giữ
of the
được những
technology
chi phí
breakthroughs
thấp.
and innovations in our own clean tech sector as they are working on these today.
Điều
It
này
is,
cũng cho chúng
however, quite
ta
aggressive
thời
in the
gian và
sense that
sự
we
linh
need to
hoạt để
act
phát
now to make
triển
the
các thị
plans
trường mới, đồng
coherent
thời tận
and
dụng những
to
đột
create
phá và
incentives
đổi
for
mới
people
công
to
nghệ
make
mà
the
lĩnh vực
transition.
công nghệ sạch của
If
riêng
we're
chúng
going to
ta
meet
đang
our
phát triển
ambitious
ngày
climate
nay.
bill climate
Nếu
goals in
chúng ta đã
2050,
sẽ
we
đạt được các
definitely
mục
have to
tiêu
act now.
khí hậu
And
đầy ước
that's
vọng
why
của
this
mình và
2030
đạt
Clean
được net
Energy Climate
zero,
Plan
không
is
khí
actually
sạch
a
vào
critical step
năm
to
2050, thì
take
đây là
over the
thập
next 10
kỷ
years
để
so that we
hành
can
động.
position ourselves to achieve the longer term
Kế
goals.
hoạch khí hậu
Next
và
slide,
năng lượng
please.
sạch cho năm 2030
So what
của
does it
chúng
look
ta
like to get to a
phát
40%
tháo và
reduction
bước
by
quan trọng mà chúng
2030?
ta sẽ cần thực hiện
As you
trong
can
10
see
năm
here,
tới
to meet
để
our
định vị
ambitious
nhà nước của
2030
chúng ta
goal and
đạt được
position
những
our
mục
state
tiêu
to
dài
achieve the
hạn
net
này.
zero by
Như
2050,
bạn có thể thấy ở
we
đây,
need to make
để đạt được mục
significant
tiêu đầy ước
progress
vọng của chúng
in the
ta vào
coming
năm
years.
2030 và
We will
định
need
vị
to
nhà nước
retrofit
của
about 1
chúng ta đạt
million
được net
homes,
zero vào năm
support
2050,
highly
chúng
efficient
ta
new
cần phải đạt
construction,
được những
and
tiến
help
bộ
people
đáng kể
adopt clean
trong
heating
những năm kế
solutions
tiếp.
like the
Chúng
various
ta sẽ
heat
cần
pump
trang bị thêm cho
technologies
hơn 1
already
triệu
on the
ngôi
market.
nhà hỗ trợ xây
We
dựng
will need to
mới,
put
hiệu
over
quả cao và giúp
750,000
mọi
new
người
zero
áp dụng
emission
giải pháp
vehicles,
sưởi
such
ấm
as
sạch
electric
như các
vehicles,
công
on
nghệ
the
bơm
road
điện khác
and
nhau đã có
achieve
trên
a
thị trường.
15%
Chúng ta cần
reduction in
đưa
commuting
750
vehicle miles
ngàn
traveled.
phương tiện không khí phát
We will
thải
need to
mới, chẳng
build
hạn như
and
xe điện,
interconnect about
trên đường và
6,000
đạt được
megawatts
mức giảm
of clean energy
15%
and
số
modernize our
km
electric
phương
grid
tiện đi
to
lại.
support the
Và chúng ta sẽ
development of
cần
these
xây
clean
dựng và kết
energy
nối
resources.
6.000 megawatt năng lượng sạch
The
và hiện
2030
đại
Clean
hóa
Energy
lưới
Climate
hiện để
Plan
hỗ trợ sự
establishes the
phát triển của
blueprint
các nguồn
for
năng lượng
achieving
sạch
these
mới
goals
này. Kế hoạch
equitably
khí
and
hậu và năng lượng
affordably
sạch năm
with
2030
major
thiết
and new
lập
initiatives
kế hoạch chi tiết
advancing
để đạt được những mục
decarbonization
tiêu
of
này
the
một cách
Commonwealth
công bằng và
buildings,
hợp lý, với
transportation,
những sáng
and
kiến sẽ
electricity
thúc đẩy
sector.
qua quá trình
So I'm
khử
going to go
carbon
into
và các tòa
each of the
nhà,
sectors
giao thông và vận
briefly.
tải và các
Next
lĩnh
slide,
vực
please.
điện của khối thịnh vượng chung này.
The 2030 plan outlines
Kế hoạch
bold
năm
action to pivot
2030
the
vạch ra
building
hành
sector
động
to high
tái tạo
efficiency
nhằm
buildings
chuyển
and
lĩnh vực
clean heat.
xây dựng và khối thịnh vượng
Now, during
chung
this year,
sang các tòa nhà
Massachusetts
hiệu
will
quả
create a
cao
new
và
net
nhiệt
zero
sạch.
high
Trong
performance
năm
stretch
nay,
building energy
Massachusetts sẽ
code
tạo
to
ra một
ensure our
mã
newest
năng
buildings
lượng
are
mới cho tòa
resilient
nhà,
and energy
hiệu suất
efficient.
bằng không để
Communities
đảm
can
bảo các
adopt the
tòa
stretch
nhà
code
mới
starting
nhất của
next year
chúng
with
tôi có
code
khả năng
becoming
phục hồi và
mandatory
tiết
and
kiệm
effective
năng
statewide
lượng.
by
Các cộng đồng có
2028.
thể áp dụng
But about
mã năng lượng kéo
80% of
dài
the
này
buildings
bắt
we'll
đầu
have
từ
in
năm
2050 are
sau,
actually
với mã
standing
trở
now.
thành bắt buộc và có
So
hiệu lực trên toàn tiểu
it's not
bang
only
vào
important
năm
that we have
2028.
stretch codes for our new buildings,
Gần đây
we
tôi đã
also
đến
need to
thăm tòa
focus on
nhà dành
taking
cho
bold
nhiều gia
actions
đình hoàn
on
toàn mới
existing
được xây
buildings.
dựng theo tiêu
And this
chuẩn
is
nhà
going to
thụ
be
động
extremely
của
challenging,
Closter.
but
Đó là
we need
điều
to
hoàn
set
toàn
our
ấn
path
tượng mà các nhà
in
thiết
doing so
kế và
now.
nhà phát triển có thể đạt
First,
được.
we will
Điều
pivot
này
the Mass
sử
SAVE
dụng các
program, which
công
is an
nghệ
energy
hiện
efficiency
có
program,
và chi
limiting
phí
fossil
không lớn
fuel
hơi đáng
heating
kể
system incentives
so
in
với
the
các tòa
next
nhà thông
3-year
thường mới. Nếu
plan
bạn
for
chưa có cơ hội
2022
thăm những
through
công trình kiến trúc
2024,
này,
and then
tôi
ending
mong bạn
all
sẽ đi
fossil
xem
fuel
một
heating
trong
system
số chúng.
incentives by
Dù
the
sao
end of
tôi cũng là một kiến
2024.
trúc sư, vì vậy
We
tôi
will
rất
also
hào hứng
expand access to
với
energy
điều đó, nên
efficiency
tôi đã
and
đưa
clean
con gái
heating
13
for
tuổi của
low and
mình trở
moderate
lại
income
công
renters
trường
and
để cho
homeowners
cô ấy
in environmental
nhìn
justice
những gì
communities
kiến trúc
through
sư đang
targeted
làm bây giờ.
community-based
Nhưng khoảng
incentives and
80%
outreach
các tòa
programs.
nhà mà chúng ta đã có vào năm
While the
2050
2030 plan
đang tồn tại
mentions
ngày
air
nay.
source
Vì
heat
vậy,
pumps
kế hoạch
several
năm
times, we
2030
actually
cũng tập
mean
trung vào việc thực
really
hiện các hành động
all
táo
available
bạo
technology,
và các tòa nhà hiện có.
including air source heat pumps, but also including other types of heat pumps and
Điều này
electric
tất nhiên là rất
heat,
khó. Tôi sở
water
hữu ngôi
heaters,
nhà từ năm
solar, hot water,
1920
as
và
well as
hệ thống
declining
sưởi
emissions through
bằng
best
khí đốt
practices
siêu hiệu
such
quả.
as
Chúng tôi có
preventative
lẽ là
maintenance
một trong
of
những ngôi nhà hiệu quả
HVAC.
nhất trong khu phố của chúng tôi,
In
thường
addition
giữ
to
nhiệt độ
measures to
tương đối
decarbonize
thấp vào mùa
existing
đông.
buildings, we have a
Mặc
plan
áo
forward
len,
to
chúng
cap
tôi
and
đã
reduce
tận dụng
emissions
tất cả các
from the
chương
building
trình
sector in
mass
general.
save, và
We will
tôi đang xem
convene
xét
a
việc
governor's
lắp đặt một
commission
máy
for
bơm nhiệt
clean
nguồn không
for
khí
the
trong một tòa nhà cũ như
Clean
vậy sẽ
Heat,
cần
as
những
well
gì
as an
rất khó để làm
interagency
cho các
Clean
con
Heat
số
task
hoạt động.
force.
Tôi hiểu,
This
nhưng
work
để
will
đạt
build
được mức
on the
giảm
Department
phát
of Public
thải mà chúng
Utilities
ta
study
cần,
to
chúng ta
assess
sẽ
the
phải trang bị
role of
thêm
natural
các
gas
tòa
companies in
nhà cũ và
ensuring
chúng
a
ta
low
sẽ
carbon
cần cả
future
khu
and
vực
explore
công và tư
strategies
nhân tham
that will
gia
enable
vào
the
nỗ lực đó để
Commonwealth to
tìm ra
achieve
cách
net
tài
zero
trợ cho
emissions
các
while safeguarding
chuyển
ratepayers'
đổi
interest
này.
in
Khối
securing
thịnh vượng
safe,
chung sẽ xoay
reliable,
trục trong
and
chương trình
affordable natural
Massive.
gas
Trước
service.
tiên hãy hạn chế các ưu đãi
By
về
the
hệ
end of
thống
2021, the
sưởi
Commission and Task
bằng
Force
nhiên
on
liệu
Clean
hóa
Heat
thạch kế
will
hoạch 3
recommend
năm
a
tiếp cho năm
framework for
2022
new
và
long-term
2024
declining
và
emissions
sau đó
cap
chấm dứt
for
tất
heating
cả các
fuels
ưu đãi
used
về
in the
hệ
state.
thống sưởi
And this
bằng
would
nhiệt
include
liệu
natural
hóa thạch
gas,
vào cuối
fuel
năm
oil, and
2024.
propane.
Chúng tôi sẽ
By the
mở
end
rộng
of
khả năng tiếp cận
2022,
sử dụng
they will
năng lượng
recommend
hiệu quả hệ
statutory,
thống sưởi sạch
regulatory,
cho
and
những người thuê
financing
nhà và
mechanism
chủ
needed
nhà có thu
to
nhập thấp trong
ensure
trung
that the
bình hoặc
development
trong
of
các
a
cộng đồng
reliable and
công bằng
affordable
môi
clean
trường
heat
thông qua các
solution
chương trình
for all of
khuyến
our
khích và
buildings.
tiếp cận cộng đồng có mục tiêu. Trong khi kế hoạch năm
Next slide,
2030 đề
please.
cập
Next slide, I'm going to focus on the transportation sector. In the transportation sector,
trong lĩnh vực giao
the
thông vận tải,
Transportation and Climate Initiative
chương
Program,
trình
or the
sáng kiến khí hậu và vận
TCIP,
tải
is central
hay
to our
còn gọi là
strategy.
TCIP là một
TCIP is a
trọng
multi-state
tâm
cap,
trong chiến lược
and
của
in a
chúng tôi.
multi-state program
TCIP
that will
là một
reduce motor vehicle
tổ chức
pollution
đa
by
tiểu
at
bang và
least
nằm trong một chương trình
26% and
đa tiểu
generate
bang
1.8
sẽ
billion
giảm
in
thiểu ô
Massachusetts
nhiễm
by
phương tiện
2032 to
cơ
invest
giới số
in the
ít nhất là
transport sector
26% và tạo ra hơn
to
1.8
ensure
tỷ
that
đô
we have
la
an
ở
equitable and
Massachusetts
cleaner
vào năm
transportation
2032 để đầu
options.
tư vào các phương
The
pháp giao
program
thông
will
công bằng
require
sạch
large
hơn.
gasoline and
Chương
diesel
trình sẽ
fuel
yêu cầu các
suppliers to
nhà cung
purchase
cấp xăng và
allowances
nhiên liệu
for
lớn phải
pollution
mua
that
phụ
results
cấp
from the
cho ô nhiễm
combustion of
do đốt
fuels
cháy
they
nhiên
sell
liệu
in the
mà
region.
họ bán trong
And
khu
then the
vực.
revenues from the sale of the emissions
Doanh thu
allowance
và khu
will
vực
be
bán
invested
phụ
in
cấp
clean transportation
phát thải
options,
có thể được đầu
thus
tư vào
providing a
các phương pháp
dedicated
giao thông sạch,
funding
do đó
source
cung cấp
for
một nguồn
increasing
vốn
the
chuyên
deployment
dụng
of
để
zero
tăng
emission
cường
vehicle,
triển
expanding the
khai các
electric
phương
vehicle
tiện không
charging
phát thải,
infrastructure network,
mở rộng
and
mạng lưới cơ
electrifying
sở hạ
transit
tầng,
buses.
chạc
No
xe
less
điện
than
và điện khí
35%
hóa
of the
xe buýt vận
proceeds
tải.
from the
Sẽ
auction
không
of the
ít
allowances
hơn
will be set
35%
aside to
số tiền
ensure
thu
that
được từ việc
overburdened
đấu
and
giá các
underserved
khoản phụ cấp
communities
sẽ được
benefit
dành để đảm
equitably from
bảo
the clean
rằng
transportation
cộng
projects
đồng và
and
quá tải và
programs.
không được phục vụ
As
được hưởng
TCIP
một
gets started
cách
and
công
given
bằng
potential
từ các dự
changes in
án
the
và chương
federal
trình
and
giao thông sạch.
regional
Khi
transportation initiatives, we will closely
TCIP
monitor the
bắt đầu đưa
funding
ra
needs to
những thay
support the
đổi tiềm
programs
năng trong
to
các
achieve
sáng
our
kiến giao
2030
thông và vận
emissions
tải
limit
của
and
liên
beyond.
bang hoặc khu vực, chúng
In
tôi
addition
sẽ
to that,
theo dõi chặt
Massachusetts will
chẽ những
join
nhu cầu
California in
đặt
mandating that
tài
by
trợ để hỗ trợ
2035,
các chương trình đạt được
100%
giới
of
hạn
new
phát
light-duty
thải năm
vehicles sold
2030 và
in
hơn thế
Massachusetts
nữa.
will be
Ngoài
zero emissions
TCIP,
vehicles.
Massachusetts sẽ tham
For
gia cùng
medium and heavy-duty
California yêu
vehicles,
cầu đến
we
năm
join with
2035,
15 other
100%
jurisdictions
xe
in a
hạng nhẹ
coordinated
mới được
effort
bán trong
to have
khối
30% of
Commonwealth
all new trucks
là
and
xe
buses
chỉ phát
sold in
thải không
Massachusetts
khí sạch.
be zero emission vehicles by 2030, increasing to 100% sales by 2050. We will continue to
Chúng tôi tiếp
to
tục
create
khuyến khích việc
incentives
mua bán
for the
phương tiện
purchases of
không
new
phát thải mới
zero
cả
emission
hạng nhẹ
vehicles,
và
both
hạng
light
nặng
duty
thông
and
qua
heavy
các
duty,
chương trình giảm
through
giá
state
và khuyến
rebates
khích của
and
tiểu
incentive
bang, đồng
programs,
thời
and
hỗ trợ
support the
việc tiếp tục
continued
xây dựng
build out
cơ sở
of
hạ tầng
robust, smart,
thông minh,
statewide
chặt
charging
thông minh
infrastructure
mạnh mẽ
to
trên toàn
ensure we
tiểu
address
bang, bảo đảm
concerns
chúng tôi giải
about
quyết
range
mối lo ngại
anxiety
về
throughout the
sự
state.
lo lắng trong phạm vi nhà nước.
To reduce
Để giảm
harmful air
thiểu các chất
pollutions
ô nhiễm không khí có
from
hại từ các
diesel-powered
phương tiện
vehicles,
chạy bằng
the
động cơ
Commonwealth
diesel,
will work
khối
with
thịnh
neighboring
vượng
states
chung
to
sẽ làm
develop
việc
and
với các
implement
ban lân cận để
low
phát
carbon
triển
fuel
và
standards
thực hiện
by
tiêu chuẩn về
2026.
nhiên liệu các carbon thấp
While
của khu vực vào năm
electrifying our vehicles
2026,
and
trong khi
decarbonizing
điện
our
khí hóa phương
transportation
tiện
fuels
của
are
chúng
important
tôi và khử
strategies,
carbon
we
nhiên
will
liệu
also
giao
pursue
thông của
strategies to
chúng
reduce
tôi là
vehicle
những chiến
miles
lược quan
traveled,
trọng. Chúng tôi
including
sẽ theo
strengthening
đuổi các
incentives
chiến
and
lược để giảm
opportunities to
số
lock in permanent
km phương tiện
reductions
đã đi, bao
in the
gồm
number
tăng
of
cường các
vehicle
biện pháp
traveled,
khuyến khích và
vehicle
cơ
miles
hội để
traveled
giảm vĩnh viễn
annually by commuters
15% số
statewide.
km phương tiện di chuyển hàng năm người
We will
đi
also
làm trên
continue
toàn
to
tiểu bang.
encourage and
Khối thịnh vượng
incentivize
chung
a
sẽ tiếp
broad
tục
range
khuyến
of
khích
smart
và khuyến
growth.
khích một loạt các chính sách tăng cường thông
Smart
minh,
growth policies
trong đó
will
khuyến khích
encourage
các chuyến
fewer
đi
and
ít
shorter
hơn và ngắn
motor
hơn bằng
vehicle
phương tiện
trips,
cơ giới,
prioritize
ưu
development
tiên chuyển
near
gần
public
phương
transit,
tiện công
and
cộng và cho
enable
phép
the
sử
use
dụng
of
các phương
alternative
án đi
zero
di
carbon
chuyển
mobility options
không
like
carbon thay
walking
thế
and
như đi
biking.
bộ và đi xe đạp.
Next slide, please.
Trang kế tiếp.
Now I'm going to talk about the energy sector.
Bây giờ chúng tôi nói về
We
đề
will
xuất
need to
chính sách
ensure
để
that
đạt
our landmark
được mức
nation-leading
giảm
clean energy
45%.
and clean transmission
Chúng tôi
procurement,
cần bảo đảm
including
rằng các
3.2
gói
gigawatt of
thầu năng
offshore
lượng
wind,
sạch và
1
truyền tải
gigawatt of
sạch hàng
hydropower,
đầu quốc
and
gia của
3.2
chúng tôi
gigawatt
bao
of
gồm
smart
3.2
solar program come online, as those will be
mét
essential
gió
in
ngoài
achieving
khơi,
our
1
2030 limits. These
GWU
are
thủy
all
điện và
programs that have
3.2
already been
GWU của chương trình
designed,
năng lượng mặt
and we
trời.
were on our
Smart được
pathways
đưa vào
to
trực tuyến
developing
vì
them
đó
and
sẽ là điều
implementing
cần
them.
thiết để đạt được giới hạn năm
We will
2030.
facilitate a
Chúng
path
tôi
to
sẽ tạo
market
điều
for an
kiện thuận
additional
lợi
2
cho con
gigawatt
đường
of
tiếp
new
cận thị
distributed
trường
clean
để có
generation
thêm
between
2
2025 and
GWU thế
2030,
hệ
an
sạch
additional 6
mới
gigawatt
được
of
phân
offshore
phối
wind in
từ năm
Massachusetts
2025 đến
beyond
2030 và
2030.
thêm 6 GWU gió ngoài
Additionally,
khơi
we
ở
will
vùng nước
continue to
Massachusetts
lead
từ năm
in multi-state
2030
efforts
đến
that the governors
2040.
of
Ngoài ra, chúng tôi sẽ tiếp
all
tục
the New
dẫn
England
đầu
states
nỗ
have
lực
committed
bang
to
do các thống đốc
realign
Baker
our
Mills,
regional
Scott
system
Lemon
planning.
và
That means transmission planning,
Raymond công bố
markets,
vào
our
tháng 10 năm
wholesale electricity
2050
markets,
nhằm điều chỉnh lại
and our
quy hoạch thị
wholesale
trường và
operations
hoạt động
with
của
state
hệ thống khu vực
decarbonization efforts.
với các nỗ lực khử carbon của các ban.
We have received some
Chúng ta
comments and
nhận được một số ý
questions
kiến và
around the
câu hỏi
accounting and
về kế
assumption for
toán
electricity
giả định
generation.
cho việc phát điện.
We definitely
Kế hoạch
have
2030
built our
cũng như lộ trình
2030 plan and the
2050
roadmap,
được
2050
xây
roadmap,
dựng trên một
based
phương
on the
pháp tính
accounting
toán và tỷ
methodology and
lệ phát
emissions rate
thải
from the mass
từ
DEP
kiểm
greenhouse
kê
gas
khí nhà kính mass
inventory.
DEP,
But
như
we do
chúng tôi
expect
tự
to
kiến
update
sẽ
the
cập nhật
inventory in
lượng
the next
hàng
few
tồn
years
kho
to
trong 2
adjust
năm
our
tới
calculations
và sẽ cần điều
accordingly
chỉnh
so
các
that
tính
we can
toán của
ensure
mình
that we
cho
meet
phù
our
hợp để
2030
đảm
limit.
bảo đáp ứng giới hạn
Next
năm
slide, please.
2030. Trang kế tiếp.
I want to talk next about non-energy sector.
Chúng ta nói tiếp
In the Interim 2030 Clean Energy Climate Plan, a lot since we have published it, a lot
kể
has
từ
happened at the
khi kế
federal
hoạch
level.
tạm thời
We expect to
2030 được
update
công
the
bố vào
discussion
ngày
around
30
federal
tháng
actions
12,
in the
rất
final
nhiều điều đã
2030
xảy ra
plan,
ở cấp
including
liên
the
bang.
passage
Chúng
of
tôi
the
dự kiến
American
sẽ cập nhật
Innovation
cuộc
and
thảo luận
Manufacturing Act, or the
xung
AIM
quanh
Act,
các hành
that
động của
enacts a
liên bang trong
phase
kế hoạch
down
cuối
of
năm 2030, bao gồm
hydrofluorocarbons,
việc thông qua đạo luật
HFCs.
sản xuất và đổi mới ở Hoa
HFCs
Kỳ
are
hoặc đạo
potent
luật
climate pollutants
AMI
commonly
ban
used
hành
as
loại bỏ
coolants
dần các
in air conditioners and refrigerators. We will be
hydrofluorocarbon.
implementing a regulation to limit the
HFC
sale
là
of
chất gây ô nhiễm khí hậu mạnh thường được sử
HFCs
dụng
in the
làm chất
Commonwealth,
làm mát
and will
trong máy
support
điều hòa và
policies
không
at
khí
the
và tủ
federal
lạnh.
level, like the
Chúng
AIM
tôi sẽ
Act,
thực hiện
that
một
further
quy định để
curb the
hạn
emissions
chế
from
bán
highly potent
HFC
climate
trong khối thịt vượng
pollutants.
chung và sẽ hỗ trợ các chính sách cấp
We will
liên
also
bang
be
đạo luật
working with
AIM
other
nhằm làm cong
agencies
hơn
across the state
nửa lượng
to
khí
ensure best
thải từ các
practices
chất gây ô
are in
nhiễm khí
place
hậu
around
mạnh.
waste,
Chúng tôi sẽ làm việc
wastewater,
với cơ
and
quan trên toàn
agricultural
khối thịnh vượng
emissions.
chung để đảm bảo áp dụng các phương pháp tốt
Next
nhất
slide.
về chất thải, nước
The
thải
land
và khí
sector.
thải nông nghiệp.
The
Bây
land
giờ
sector
là
analysis
đất
from
bảo
our
vệ tăng
2050
cường
roadmap
hấp thụ
study
carbon.
indicates that our trees and our
Phân tích
vegetation
lĩnh
are
vực từ đất
sequestering about
đai từ
5
nghiên cứu lộ
million
trình
metric
2050
tons
cho
of
chúng tôi
carbon
chỉ ra
dioxide
rằng
per year.
cây cối và thảm
Combined
thực
with
vật của chúng tôi
45%
đang cô
reduction
lập
in
khoảng
gross
5 triệu tấn
emissions,
carbon
this
dioxide mỗi
type of
năm. Kết
sequestering
hợp
will
với
help
việc giảm
Massachusetts
45%
reach
tổng
a
lượng khí thải
50%
sẽ giúp
net
Massachusetts đạt
zero
được
emissions
mục
by
tiêu phát thải rằng
50%
50% đến
reduction of the net
năm
emissions
2030.
by
Tổng lượng phát
2030.
thải là tổng lượng khí
Now, the
thải
gross
không
emissions are
tính
the
đến
total
quá
emissions
trình hấp thụ
that
carbon,
one
trong
can
khi
account
lượng
for
khí thải ròng bao gồm
without
sự cô
factoring the
lập carbon.
sequestration. So once
Trong
we
2 năm
account for
tới,
the
chúng
carbon
tôi sẽ cập nhật
sequestration,
kiểm
that's what we
kê
consider
phát thải
net emissions.
KNK trên toàn tiểu
In the
bang
next
để
2
hỗ
years,
trợ
we will
về
update the
theo
statewide
dõi quá
GHG
trình hấp
emissions
thụ
inventory
carbon
to support
như
and
một
track
phần của
carbon
nỗ lực mới
sequestration
nhằm điều
as
chỉnh
part of
việc
the new
tính toán
effort
lượng
to
khí
align
thải với mục
emissions
tiêu
accounting
net
with a net
zero,
zero
không khí
by
thải không khí sạch
2050.
vào năm 2050.
Massachusetts
có thành tích
has a
tốt
good
trong
track
việc
record
bảo vệ
of
các vùng
protecting
đất
our
tự
natural and
nhiên
working
và đất
lands,
làm việc của chúng
including an
ta, bao
innovative
gồm một
urban
chương
tree
trình
planting
trồng
program
cây đô
in our
thị
gateway
sáng tạo
cities.
và các thành phố cửa ngõ
Massachusetts
của chúng
Resilient
ta.
Lands Initiative and Healthy Soil Action Plan include best land management practices
Kế hoạch
that the
hành
Commonwealth
động
will
đất
be
lành mạnh và
implementing
sáng
in the
kiến đất
coming
lành
years
mạnh
to
của
protect
Massachusetts bao gồm các
ecosystem
phương pháp quản
health
lý tốt
and
nhất mà khối
enhance
thịnh vượng
carbon
chung sẽ thực hiện
sequestration.
trong những năm tới để bảo vệ sức
Massachusetts is
khỏe hệ
also
sinh thái và
collaborating with
tăng cường
neighboring
hấp thụ
states to
carbon.
incentivize the
Massachusetts
regional
đang hợp
use of
tác với
harvested
các
wood
bạn
in
lân cận để
long-lived
khuyến khích
products
khu vực
such
sử
as
dụng gỗ khai
cross-laminated
thác trong
timber
các sản
and
phẩm có tuổi
wood-based
thọ cao,
building
chẳng hạn
insulation,
như gỗ
which help
nhiều lớp và
harvested
vật
carbon
liệu cách
remain
nhiệt xây
stored
dựng bằng gỗ,
and
giúp
support
lưu trữ
the
carbon
local
đã thu
and
hoạch và
regional
hỗ trợ
economy.
nền kinh tế địa phương và khu vực.
Our natural working land
Tuy
alone
nhiên, chỉ
will not be
riêng
enough
các
to help
vùng đất tự
Commonwealth
nhiên và
reach
đất
net
làm việc
zero by
chung của chúng
2050.
ta sẽ không đủ để giúp
Therefore,
khối
we will
thịnh vượng chung
convene
đạt
an
được
interagency
khí
task
sạch vào
force,
năm
our carbon
2050.
sequestration,
Chúng
to
ta sẽ triệu
advise
tập một
on the
lực lượng đặc
development of a
biệt
net
liên
zero
cơ quan
accounting
về
framework
kiểm
and a
tra
carbon
carbon để
sequestration
tư
market
vấn
framework
về
by
việc phát triển
2025.
khung kế toán net zero và carbon khung thị trường cô
The
lập
public
vào năm
comment period
2025.
closes on March 22nd. Next slide, please.
Trang kế tiếp.
Hopefully you've had time to evaluate, to assess, and to review the Clean
Sẽ
Energy
có một
Climate
hội
Plan,
thảo ở
and we
trên các
welcome
như
all of
thế
your
này vào
comments
tối ngày
in
15
addition to
tháng
what we're
3.
going to hear
Thời
today.
gian lấy ý kiến công
Over
chúng
this
sẽ
month
kết thúc vào ngày
and next,
22 tháng
after we
3. Trong
review,
tháng
after we
này và
receive
tháng
the
tới,
comments, we
EEA
will
sẽ tiếp
review
tục
them,
xem xét
and our
các
plan is to
ý
release a
kiến công
finalized
chúng đã
document at
cung
the
cấp
end
và
of
kế hoạch
April.
của chúng tôi và
I
phát
really
hành một tài
appreciate you
liệu hoàn
joining
chỉnh
us
vào cuối
today
tháng 4.
and to learn
Cảm ơn
about
rất
this
nhiều
critical
vì
plan
đã
to
tham
reduce
gia
greenhouse
cùng
gas
chúng
emissions
tôi
over
để
the
tìm
next
hiểu
decade.
về những kế
And I
hoạch
very
quan
much
trọng
look
này
forward to
nhằm
listening
giải pháp
to other
thải khí
comments
nhà
as
kính
you
trong thập
provide
kỷ
them
tới. Tôi
this
hoan
evening.
nghênh bất
Thank
kỳ
you.
ý kiến bằng miệng nào mà bạn có thể có.
Thank you, Judy. If we can go to the next slide, we are going to be opening it up for public comments.
Chúng
We
tôi
had quite a
sẽ
few folks sign up
vui
to provide
lòng nếu
comments,
các
so
bạn muốn góp
we're
ý
going to ask
bằng
to
lời
aim for 2
về kế
minutes or
hoạch tạm
less,
thời 2030,
but we
xin
will
vui
give you up to
lòng
2
nhấp
minutes if
vào
you need it.
người tham gia và
Please
sau đó
click
nhấp
on the
vào
raise
giơ
hand
tay
function
nơi các mũi
within
tên có màu
Zoom, and
xanh
we
lá
will know to
cây
call
đang
on
trỏ
you.
đến.
We'll call on
Sau
folks
đó chúng
first
tôi sẽ bật
who
tiếng
signed up in
bạn
advance and
để
let us know
bạn
they
có
would be
thể
providing
nói
comment,
đối với
as
những
well
người
as folks
tham
who did
gia
not
với
already
chúng
provide
tôi
comment
qua
last
điện
week,
thoại và muốn
but I believe we should be able to get through
cùng góp
everyone.
ý vui lòng nhấn
So with that, I'm going to go and
ngôi
it
sao
looks
và
like
số 9 để cho
Lucia
biết bạn muốn
is
phát biểu khi chúng tôi gọi
first on the list.
cho
So
bạn. Bạn
you
sẽ
should be able to
cần nhấn
unmute yourself. Lucia, are you
ngôi
there?
sao
Yes,
số
thank you
6
very
để
much.
tự bật tiếng.
My name is Lucia Dolan. I'm with the 350 Mass Transportation Working Group, and I'm only going to discuss the transportation section because that's the one we've paid most attention to. And we're very concerned about the lack of goals for increasing, expanding, and electrifying public transit in the CECP. We find it worrying that MassDOT is in 2021. Its capital investment plan is purchasing 460 diesel buses and 25 diesel trains, committing the state to diesel for decades. As the CECP itself states, transportation is the largest sector of greenhouse gas emissions in the state. It is the only sector of greenhouse gas emissions that's increasing. The CECP also states that increases in vehicle miles traveled may offset some or all of the benefits from fuel switching, electrifying in other words, and alternative transportation modes. Both environmental justice and smart growth depend on mass transit. And I realized part of the TCI funding is planning on going towards mass transit, but I still think it needs to be much more than that. We urge the state to reduce both greenhouse gases and particulate matter pollution by committing to increasing, expanding, and electrifying transportation, public transportation. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Lucia, excuse me. We'll go next to Audrey Schulman. I am allowing you to talk now. Go ahead, Audrey.
Okay, thanks so much. I just wanted to say that with the building energy efficiency, One of the problems with air source heat pumps is that you generally have to have enough extra income to be able to afford them or good enough credit to do so. So it can be an equity issue, especially given that the energy bills can be more expensive afterwards. And have you considered instead, you know, if we all do that, begin one by one to leave the gas system, that will leave the people who can least afford it on the gas system, and will result in stranded assets. You know, with the low income who can't afford a new heating system, bearing the cost of that fixed cost system, which will gradually balloon per person. Then that seems like a horrible way to go. So have you instead considered networked geothermal, which could be installed by the gas companies, moving us forward at their, you know, using their financing, with their ability to install it in the right of way in the street with their customers? That might help us meet our goals faster and avoid the stranded assets and allow the gas workers to continue to have their jobs. And because it, you know, networked ground source heat pumps have some of the highest efficiencies known, and also would result, you know, if they're networked together, you can do energy sharing and energy canceling. So in other words, the supermarket on the corner can take cooling off of the system and make the water hotter for the houses down the street. And if it were all paid for, you know, so increasing the energy efficiency, if it were all paid for by the gas company, that would reduce the equity issues and allow us to move forward faster. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Audrey. I am going next to Fran Cummings. Fran, I've just unmuted you. I think you should be able to unmute yourself.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks for the opportunity for all of us to comment. Consistent with the comments that I made a year ago in Worcester, I really recommend that the state be more ambitious even than you already have. And I recognize that you've done a lot, and this is a great plan in a way, but 50% by 2030 is only the global average that the IPCC said would be necessary. And Massachusetts is a developed economy with advanced capabilities, and we've also have responsibility for our historic emissions. And so clearly we're going to need to be able to do better than other parts of the globe. And so I really don't think we should feel satisfied with the notion that, well, the globe has to do 50%, so we'll do 50%. So my other comment would just be that I think this plan needs to identify more specific actions that will be taken and funding sources, whether from Massachusetts or the federal government or the private sector. It's a little too much hope and not enough real working plan, in my view. So thanks for comments, and I'll say more in written comments.
Thank you, Fran. I am going next to Stephen Dodge. I am giving you the ability to talk. Oh, go ahead, Stephen.
Great, thanks so much. My name is Stephen Dodge. I'm from the National Biodiesel Board. I just want to preface my remarks by just reading a couple of short sentences directly from the report. And my comments are really focused on the building sector, the thermal sector. And the report says transitioning the building sector in a strategic and least cost manner is challenging, as it relies on immediately starting to leverage stock turnover points. The relatively long life of HVAC equipment, often 20 to 30 years, means that equipment installed in the 2020s may still be in service by 2050. This underscores that sales of electrified and other clean or renewable heating alternatives need to ramp up quickly to take advantage of these many transition points. And it goes on to say that transitioning to a heat pump HVAC system will have varying impacts on consumer energy costs, and particularly on low-income households. And our feeling is that there's a missing piece of the puzzle here. And one of the missing pieces, I think one of the previous speakers talked about, but we feel there's a missing piece, and that's biofuels, which is not really mentioned at all in this report. It's mentioned in the 2050 Pathways report. In fact, ironically, it's one of the suggestions mentioned in the medium and heavy-duty transportation sector. And I think we would suggest if it's good enough for medium and heavy-duty transportation sector, it should be good enough, at least as one piece of the puzzle for the thermal heating sector as well. And as you may know, the heating oil industry is proactively working towards reducing the carbon intensity of its fuel. A couple of years ago, the industry passed the so-called Providence Resolution, which establishes the attainable goal of achieving a 15% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by 2023 using B20, goes on up to net zero using B100 by 2050. And other states have seen this as a pathway, as I mentioned, New York, Rhode Island, California on the transportation side. The transition electricity is really a laudable goal, and it can make sense if it's affordable, if the infrastructure is capable of handling the load, and the source of the electricity is low carbon, as you point out. However, reaching that level of decarbonization will take many years and lots of money. And I'll just quickly end by using myself as an example. Back in January, my furnace went. It was in the 20s. My daughter was home from school. My wife was teaching from home. I was working from home. We did not have the luxury of or the option of trying to transition our heating system, which is forced hot water now, into any type of electricity type of heat pump. So we went with a furnace again, and our last one lasted 25 years, and maybe this one will as well. So my point is, there is a pathway that's missing in this report, and we feel that biofuels should be actively, and bioheat should be actively considered as a viable pathway to 2030, as it's mentioned in the 2050 report. Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity.
Great, thank you, Stephen. I'm going to go next to Claire Chang. I've just unmuted you. Go ahead, Claire.
Bây giờ tới lượt cô Claire Chang.
Hi there. Thank you very much. I'm sorry for the noise here. So I wanted to comment on the energy sector portion. The report says 1 gigawatt of solar per year. No, 1 gigawatt of wind per year and 500 megawatts of solar per year. That is vastly under the number that we need to be aiming for. The Brattle report states emphatically that we need 2 to 4 gigawatts of solar per year in order to have any chance of being able to get to 100%. And that's 100% renewable energy by 2050 Net zero is not a goal. That's just a placeholder. We have to get to 100% renewable by 2050 at the minimum. And I would say it should be 2040. And Massachusetts needs to get way ahead of itself here in order to be able to claim to be at the head of the pack. A small thing, I think the mass save incentive needs to include storage, because that's one thing that every person, every household can participate in. They don't need wind or solar on their house or in their apartment, but they can do storage. So that's something that needs to be able to be incentivized for everyone to participate. The other thing is induction cooking instead of gas cooking. An introduction would be single hot plates. I think that would be a wonderful way for people to learn about induction cooking and to be turned on by it. It's wonderful. And the last thing is that jet fuel needs to be included in the transportation climate TCIP. I'm not sure what the I stands for. So I think that covers most of my comments, and thank you very much for listening.
Great, thank you, Claire. And before we go to the next speaker, I just want to remind folks that these comments will be submitted as part of the record, but we also are accepting comments online as well if you'd like to follow any of this up with written comments.
Và tôi muốn nói cho quý
So
vị biết
with
rằng ngoài
that, I'm
ra
going to go
những
to
cái trực
Sue
tuyến này,
Butler.
chúng tôi vẫn nhận là
Sue,
nếu mà quý
I
vị
have
góp
just
ý trực
given you
tuyến
permission
trên
to
mạng.
talk.
Great,
There you go, Sue.
got permission. Thank you so much. I'm Sue Butler. I serve on the Sierra Club Energy Committee. I really would like to support what Fran Cummings and Audrey Schulman said. We've got to get off carbon, off
Bây giờ chúng
gas,
ta nghĩ là
which is
mình
not natural, and
sẽ
onto
không
renewables as quickly as
sẽ
possible.
khuyến khích là không
Biomass
còn
is
carbon
not an
và
acceptable
không sẽ dùng ga nữa.
alternative. It is less productive than gas
Và
or
tôi nghĩ
coal
là
and more
những
polluting,
cái
causing particulates
nguyên
which
liệu
have vast public
thay
health
thế sẽ
implications.
là nguyên liệu khác, tôi nghĩ sẽ
Audrey's
không là
model of
thông dụng lắm.
distributed geothermal is absolutely fantastic, and I have one here. I live in a 5-unit building where I have 2 wells that make a well water loop among 5 different heat pumps. So each apartment has its own heat pump and is able to control its heating and air conditioning. The air conditioning is going to be increasingly important because of increases in heat. There are errors in the IPCC report, with a report in 2015 from the Grantham Institute talking about how the oceans have buffered not just carbon dioxide but also heat. And if that heat had been in the air, we would have had a 68.5 degree Fahrenheit increase in temperature. So we are on a very slippery slope, thinking that we can take our time here. We've got to move quickly. We've got to get super efficient. We've got to get completely on renewables and protect our biomass because it provides both carbon sequestration in the ground and also with evapotranspiration, it cools the earth. And there are 4 major scientists and engineers who say that if we want to solve this problem, it will happen with evapotranspiration by planting 12 billion acres of trees, grasslands, and wetlands. And what you're working on is one small part of trying to stabilize an unfolding catastrophe. And I really appreciate the way that you're addressing this and welcoming comments. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Sue. I will go next to Sarah Ross. I am giving you permission to speak up.
Great, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Sarah Ross.
Yes.
My name is Sarah Ross. I'm the co-founder of Undaunted K-12. I have a specific comment on strategy B1, and then a general comment on the Commonwealth strategy for citizen engagement. And then just, more broadly, I would certainly echo the calls for more ambition here. So specifically on strategy B1, I would urge the state, that's the avoid lock-in of building systems. I would urge the Commonwealth to leverage the current COVID-inspired attention on HVAC and ventilation in our K-12 schools to ensure that schools do not lock in with like-for-like replacements of fossil fuel-based heating systems. Schools have now received over $200 billion in COVID relief. If the Biden administration is successful in passing an infrastructure bill that includes schools, there will be more funding available. As these relief funds flow to Massachusetts, it is absolutely critical that these funds are focused on frontline communities and that the DOER and the Massachusetts School Building Authority provide technical guidance and support to ensure that all HVAC upgrades are consistent with the goals of electrification. This guidance is urgently needed so that this spending can be aligned with the Commonwealth's climate plan. More broadly, the Commonwealth should consider making K-12 schools a centerpiece of its strategy. Schools are highly visible and highly cherished buildings in all communities. Deploying our building sector and transportation strategies in schools offer the state the opportunity to showcase the viability of these strategies to a wide array of community stakeholders, including students through integrated student learning experiences. Decarbonization of schools will lead to concrete and well-documented health and performance benefits for students and teachers, especially in frontline communities that bear the worst of climate impacts. Improvements in the energy efficiency of schools can deliver energy savings, which can support strained local budgets at this really crucial time. And as we have learned painfully through this pandemic, our schools are critical infrastructure So resilient schools are a cornerstone of any community resilience plans. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Sarah. We're going to go next to Joe. I am allowing you to talk while I, Joe, you were unmuted.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. My name is Joe Uglietto, and I am the president of Diversified Energy Specialists. I'm an aggregator in the Massachusetts Alternative Energy Portfolio Standard. My comments will focus on the building sector. So the APS has been extremely successful, especially with using biodiesel to displace heating oil in home heating. And I was just curious why biodiesel wasn't included in part of the solution to meet the 2030 and 2050 goals in Massachusetts. 57 million gallons of heating oil has been displaced over the last few years with biodiesel through the APS program. Biodiesel, UCO-based, provides 80% reduction from home heating oil, which has resulted in the elimination of more than 1 billion pounds of carbon dioxide in Massachusetts from home heating. Looking at the most used thermal technologies in Massachusetts, electricity, natural gas, heating oil, and propane. Natural gas and propane can't reduce their carbon score at scale, while electricity can reduce their carbon score through renewable electricity generation. Heating oil also has biodiesel and committed to a 40% reduction by 2030 and net zero carbon fuel by 2050 through the Providence Resolution. I think the CEPC should focus on converting natural gas and propane heating systems to electricity, while allowing heating oil industry to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions to meet the 2030 and 2050 state goals with biodiesel, while alleviating the added grid load and added cost of electricity, which will result from air source heat pump conversions. The cost to convert to heat pumps is extremely high for homeowners, and conversions will add grid load and increase the cost of electricity. Electrifying the building sector will nearly double the grid load and double the amount of renewable electricity generation needed to reach net zero carbon electricity. In addition, air source heat pumps cannot sufficiently heat homes here in Massachusetts and will need electric resistance heating as a supplementary heat source for the cold winter days. Pushing homeowners to convert to air source heat pumps will cost more than $20,000 per installation. Environmental justice populations will not be able to afford these conversions. Air source heat pump installations will only occur in mid to high income communities that can't, while environmental justice populations won't be able to afford them. This will increase the cost of electricity for all ratepayers, including in environmental justice populations. This will increase a large greenhouse gas emissions gap and a large energy affordability gap in Massachusetts, which will result in devastating effects to environmental justice populations. Biofuels can reduce greenhouse gas emissions now, which is more valuable than in 2030. In addition, biofuels can be distributed at a wide scale with no additional cost to the homeowners. I urge you to consider biodiesel as part of the solution for environmental justice populations. And I believe that the plan as written could be very harmful to environmental justice populations if biodiesel isn't considered part of the solution. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. We're going next to Chris Cerami. Chris, I've just given you ability to talk. Though it looks like you are still muted. Oh, yep, go ahead, Chris.
I'm with the Take Back the Grid campaign of Boston DSA. And I want to echo some of the previous comments about mass transportation, one of the big ones. For example, rather than relying on 100,000 or so new electric vehicles being sold every year, I think it would be far more effective and equitable to expand mass transit and make it free or affordable for everyone in the state. Most people cannot afford to buy a new car, whether that's an electric vehicle or an internal combustion engine, and a tax break or rebate program doesn't have money in the bank to purchase a new vehicle in the first place. And additionally, many residents, especially those who live in the densest, most urban parts of the state, do not have access to charging infrastructure. If you live in a multi-level apartment building, you probably don't have a garage or a dedicated parking spot where you can charge a vehicle. Similarly, low-income homeowners can't afford heating upgrades. A lot of people don't have that kind of money saved up that they can spend on something like making their home more efficient. And landlords who pass
có
utility
nhiều
costs
người họ
along to
không có đủ khả
renters
năng
have
để
no
dành
incentive to
tiền
upgrade, and
để
the
mà
costs that they view unnecessary will
mua
simply
những cái
cut into
xe
their
như vậy.
profits. So the state needs to be much more active in building retrofits that aren't just for the
Cho
middle and
nên
upper class
không những
homeowners. And rather than
chính
relying on
phủ
markets to make
mà
utilities
cũng
affordable,
phải
these utilities can and
nghĩ
should be
tới
controlled
những
at
cái
the
chuyện như
local and
vậy
state
nữa.
level and publicly funded so that they can be under more democratic control of the people who will be utilizing them. And that will allow us to get out of relying on corporations who are going to search for a cheap and quick solution rather than something that's going to long-term be sustainable for our planet.
Great, thank you, Chris. We are going to go to Maria Belen. I just gave you permission to speak.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
¿Me escuchan? Hola, mi nombre es María Belén Power y yo soy la directora asociada de Green Roots Raíces Verdes, una organización de justicia ambiental en las comunidades de Chelsea y de East Boston. Green Roots Raíces Verdes es parte del grupo de trabajo de justicia climática como parte del Consejo Asesor de Implementación. Primero quisiera agradecer por proveer interpretación para que las comunidades como la mía puedan participar. Esto es un gran paso para las comunidades de justicia ambiental. También quiero resaltar 3 temas. El primero es sobre el transporte público. Nosotros creemos que debe de haber una meta dedicada solamente al transporte público y detallar cómo el Estado se va a comprometer a electrificar los buses. Primeramente y especialmente en las poblaciones de justicia ambiental, las cuales dependen en el transporte público para poder sobrevivir. Segundo, quiero resaltar el tema de las infraestructuras de electrificación, como las plantas eléctricas o las subestaciones. A medida que vamos electrificando los sectores, especialmente el sector del transporte público y los sistemas de calefacción, el Estado tiene que asegurarse que las comunidades más impactadas por el cambio climático y la justicia ambiental no vayan a llevar otro cargo más de estas infraestructuras que pueden ser peligrosas. La secretaria de esta misma agencia, la Agencia de Asuntos Ambientales, acaba de aprobar una subestación en la comunidad de East Boston, en uno de los lugares más peligrosos que se pueden imaginar, al lado de tanques de petróleo, en un terreno que ya se ha inundado varias veces, al lado de un parque de recreación y en un vecindario increíblemente denso, en el cual mayormente viven inmigrantes de bajos recursos. Si de verdad vamos a seguir electrificando los diferentes sectores, no podemos echarle otra vez más la carga a las comunidades más pobres, las comunidades de color y las comunidades que no hablan inglés. Esto es exactamente lo opuesto a la justicia ambiental y a la justicia climática. Y como último punto, quisiera resaltar la necesidad de incorporar la justicia ambiental y la justicia climática a través de todo este plan y no solamente en algunas áreas. Muchas gracias.
And Maria Belen, thank you very much for those comments. For the English audience, I don't know, we captured them in Spanish. If you would like to provide translation, or we could have the interpreter provide that, we could make that happen, or you can leave it. I want to give you that option.
Perdón, yo pensé que iba a haber interpretación al inglés también.
And I unfortunately did not understand that, but I will give you.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought there was. I thought there would be interpretation both ways, into Spanish and into English, for it to be bilingual.
I think in this Spanish room, they probably just let you speak. Go ahead, and then in the other. Oh, unfortunately, yes, the other rooms, unless they know Spanish, they would not be able to translate it from their language.
I guess, sorry, I'll just finish by, I mean, I obviously provided comments with some like content that is important to share, and I can share that in English. I guess the point about language interpretation is that it can't just be one way. It needs to be 2 ways for the conversation to be really fluid.
Thank you. Anything else you'd like to add, or else I can move on.
Thank you.
No, thank you very much. I'm going to go next to Connor Rocket. Connor, if you are able to go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity. I'm a forest policy fellow at New England Forestry Foundation based in Littleton. Speaking on behalf of the organization, I'm also a Cambridge resident. Today, NEF conserves and manages over 140 community forests, totaling more than 30,000 acres throughout New England, and is working to advance climate solutions from the forest sector. Our comments relate to the land sector and building sector strategies in the report. We commend EEA for including strategy L3 to incentivize regional manufacture and use of durable wood products. We recommend bolstering this strategy by including a quantitative embodied carbon standard or benchmark for state-funded construction in the CECP. Requiring construction materials to meet an embodied carbon standard would help lower emissions from the building sector and indirectly incentivize the use of local sustainably harvested wood products, such as mass timber. The policy would tie sustainable construction practices to climate smart forest management for long-lived wood products, which is an elegant joint solution for both the building and forest sector. California and other states that lead in climate action have begun to adopt embodied carbon standards, and NEF urges EEA to set Massachusetts on a path to do the same for the CECP. Thank you again for your consideration of our comments, which we will elaborate on in written form, and for your leadership to address the climate crisis.
Thank you very much, Connor. Next to Elizabeth Sockwell, I have just given you permission.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so hi, my name's Elizabeth Sockwell. I'm from Newton, Massachusetts. I'm the leader of the 4C Tree Project, which is a COVID-19 tree memorial where we're going to plant 170 trees in honor of those who passed away due to COVID-19. And I'm actually currently a local environmental policy intern with the city councilor in Newton, Massachusetts. So I've been learning a lot recently about promoting sustainable local and community economic development. And one thing that really was frustrating for me was when I started to look online for what resources were available to the average person, I kept stumbling upon report after lengthy report, done obviously by all these experts, right? The Cadmus Group, like all these various, big wealthy firms that are, these reports are done obviously with tax-paying dollars. And to me, what's frustrating is, no, at this point, Massachusetts, let's be honest, we are no longer a leader in terms of the environment. The Global Warming Solution Act of 2008 was passed when I was in elementary school. I'm 23 now. It's really unacceptable. It's emotional. And also, but I'm going to stick to the facts. So if we go to page 6 of the building section report, it states that if we now implement net zero on-site policy, if we put that in place by 2023, we might only reduce emissions by 87%. And so this is written in the report that was published in December. And I'm really frustrated because if that was published in December, then why is Governor Baker vetoing a bill that will simply allow cities like Newton to put in place net zero energy building requirements, which is a necessity if we want to get to 100% renewable energy by 2050. And really, this comes down to, are we going to be loyal to big developers, which is clearly where Governor Baker's loyalty lies, or are we going to be loyal to vulnerable communities who are going to be the worst impacted by the climate crisis, by rising sea levels, by all the problems that are coming with climate change? And I'm sick and tired and upset, but I believe in action, and I believe in local community action. And I really hope that my words will be heard. I've been calling Governor Baker. I called for the past, multiple weeks. And I'm just worried that, local people's voices aren't being heard. We don't need any more fancy reports. We need reports that are actually written by, nonprofits who are actually going to be doing the work. I think a lot of local environmental nonprofits should be included. We need more public-private partnerships and better governance here in Massachusetts. And I want Massachusetts to be a leader. I'm going to stay here my whole life. I love Boston. So I say this as someone with a lot of respect and appreciation for the city of Boston. I love the city of Boston, and I love Massachusetts. And I just hope that, we can use this time to pass stringent policy that protects vulnerable communities, that safeguards our clean water, our clean air, and that revives our economy by building jobs.
Alyssa, can you please wrap up?
Yeah, so overall, I just want to say we can have a more resilient and strong economy if we transition to clean energy, and we don't need any more reports, we need action. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. And I am going to thank you very much for folks who have registered in advance and spoken. I want to know for anyone who might be on the phone, if you can please press *9 to raise your hand. If you do have any comments, I want to make sure that we don't lose track of you as we get through the list. But next, I'm going to go to Brian Campbell. Brian, I've just given you permission.
So can you hear me now?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, this is Brian Campbell. I'm an electrical engineer educated at UMass Lowell. I originally was in a renewable energy track there, but this was like 35 years ago. We also have a nuclear reactor at UMass Lowell. And I interfaced, the renewable energy track has been a pretty good career for me, but I am now of the opinion that we must go nuclear. One of the things that I want to point out is Massachusetts, 73.3 million gigatons of emissions in 2018. Our goal is to get to 70.8. Okay, that's 22.7 reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. We didn't make it, not even with COVID. And the reason why is because we shut down Pilgrim nuclear power plant. That was 62% of our renewable, of our clean energy, including hydro and the renewables that have been installed in the last 20 years at a tremendous cost. And Pilgrim could have operated until 2032. It had a license until then. It makes no sense to me that we have done this, that we're not supporting our two last reactors in New England right now, which are Millstone, it's got 2 reactors, and Seabrook Nuclear Station in New Hampshire. Instead, the state actively campaigns to shut those down by supporting an organization called C2 up in Newburyport to a tune of about $180,000 a year. It's crazy. And I got these figures from the Energy Information Administration that the Department of Energy runs. And the biggest thing I want to show, that I want to talk about, is that anybody can see how good nuclear is by just comparing our grid, our ISO New England grid, to Ontario's nuclear powered grid. It's got about 65% nuclear compared to about 20% in New England. And the price for per kilowatt hour is twice as cheap in Ontario as in New England. I'm paying 23 cents a kilowatt hour in Cambridge, okay? And the emissions in Ontario are the lowest in North America. And
Brian, can you
I
please
appreciate you for letting me speak, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Brian. Great. We want to make sure we can get to everyone. I see a couple of new hands are up. If anyone is preparing to make comments, please do raise your hands, and I'll try to time accordingly. But I'm going to go to Pamela Kelly now. Pamela, I've just given you permission, so you should be able to unmute. Go ahead, Pamela.
So my biggest concern is actually that we don't have anything in this that I can see so far that's on job creation and training. And you can't electrify everything unless you've got electricians. And our electricians are very curtailed. If to get a master electrician, you have to have a master electrician for every site. And one apprentice only per master or journeyman electrician, unless you do something about really gearing up for the training of jobs, you're not going to get anywhere. Then the other thing is on financing. We've had a proposal before the legislature for 5 years, I believe now, on green banks, a proven system that will generate $3.5 for every of private investment for every $1 of public investment. It's getting a very strong support at the federal level, but we have to have a vehicle for collecting federal money that hopefully will be coming from the National Green Bank, which is called the Accelerator. It's now been introduced as of today by the chair of the National Energy Committee. There's a good chance that it might pass. And if it passes, it's asking for $100 billion over 10 years. I believe that will be enough, but to help move the financial opportunities that are available through states, but we have to have a vehicle to move that money. And that legislation has been introduced by my state representative, vice chair of the TUE for the House, Paul Mark, and that's a green bank bill. So that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Pamela. We'll go next to Gia Neswald. I've just unmuted you, so go ahead, Gia.
Hi, Claire. Thank you for your emails earlier today. You've been most kind. I'd like to reiterate the request of about 20 people to extend our comments deadline to the 31st due to the fact that we are still trying to get answers to questions that we thought we might receive from the presentation. And I appreciate your help working toward that, Claire. Another comment I think is of great importance is that our greatest terrestrial, both carbon sink and carbon storage facility is our forests. And we're blessed with a large number of forests, which would sequester about 30% of our emissions, at least on a national level, that's the number. However, all forests are not created equal. It is scientifically known and will be documented in our written comments that the largest 1% of trees sequester 30% of the carbon in a temperate forest, such as those in the Northeast here. And it is those very trees that are being targeted for the majority of durable wood products, which are estimated in the plan to have a lifespan of up to 100 years. Our forests are relatively young and have an additional lifespan of perhaps unlimited, and that will be documented if allowed to grow naturally. In any case, the individual trees are on average 120 years, or I'm sorry, the oldest trees are 120 years old. They have a lifespan of another 200 to 300 years, barring any disaster like climate change. And we need them. We need them much more for sequestering carbon than for becoming alternatives for quick incineration, and which would produce emissions up to 300% that of natural gas and 150% of coal. Or for durable wood products, we need to go to hemp and other alternatives that allow our trees to do their most important job. I'd also like to state that there should be no land sector plan until there's a proper inventory. And you and I, Claire, have been talking about the fact that there's no inventory yet for carbon sequestration, which, you know, that's about a third of the carbon that we're holding. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Gia. We'll go to Tony Beatty. Tony, I'm giving you permissions. Should be able to unmute.
Hi, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
So I am a selectman in the town of Pepperell. I'm also a long-term farmer, and I would like to see farms have a greater role in the climate change policies. I think that even though we're 6% of our land mass, we have a great role in food security as well as in sequestering carbon in our soils. There are two bills that I've worked on with Senator Ed Kennedy that will be coming up to the State House. One is to support dual use solar on farms, which will allow farms to sell electrons back into the grid and create a second revenue stream, which will help farms who are mostly in distress economically. The other bill is to organize, this is going into a study, I believe, how to get our feedstock, our waste feedstock, into a compost facility that's licensed and under state control, and how to facilitate getting that compost into our soils, whether it be farm soils, municipal soils, lawns, etc. And happily, I learned that the USDA is working on improved soil testing so that we can actually map carbon content, microbes, water holding capacities of our soils, which will be a great step in inventorying what we have now and how we can improve on that, measure that, and report on that improvement. And lastly, as a selectman, I've initiated and we've appointed a climate change committee in Pepperell, whose task is to help the town pass out what opportunities there are given through the federal government or the state government or by our own initiatives to address our carbon footprint, to be in step with the state and the federal government. And my wish, and I've talked to Lori Trahan about this, Congresswoman Lori Trahan, that I think all towns in Massachusetts and across this country should have a like committee so that we have a standardization of a board that the state can rely on at the local level to implement plans and then report back on their success. So thank you.
Thank you, Tony. I'm going to go to Eugenia. I have just given you permissions.
All right, you can hear me?
We're good.
Thank you so much. You know, I want to thank EEA for hosting this webinar and also last week's webinar. Both did include language translation, and I think certainly, as Maria Belén Power's remarks earlier underscored, the importance of two-way communication as a cornerstone of meaningful engagement and inclusive processes cannot be overstated. We're not quite there yet, but this is a really important step in that direction, and it is greatly appreciated, so thank you. I will be joining my colleagues from the Climate Justice Working Group and also from the environmental community submitting detailed comments next week. But I wanted to offer a couple of additional thoughts for now. One is that it is really imperative that we factor fully all of the health benefits associated with the clean energy transition, and that we consider these when we are doing comprehensive climate planning in Massachusetts. I greatly appreciate the economic and health impacts report that accompanied the draft CECP, but I would argue that it contains conservative estimates of the various benefits associated with transitioning to a decarbonized future. And I would really urge EEA to, and all of us, to delve more deeply into what those full benefits could be, rather than focusing almost exclusively and almost to our detriment on GHG emission reductions. We have a portfolio of policies that need to be addressed and complied with, and so I really encourage us to take a holistic approach to do that. And then as the COVID crisis has demonstrated, and I think we all know this, I certainly hope we know this, it is, unfortunately, it is low-income communities and communities of color that are continually and disproportionately burdened by health inequality, economic insecurity, food insecurity, housing insecurity, energy insecurity, all of these things. And these are the communities that are on the front line of the climate crisis. I implore EEA, the Baker administration, and all of us to learn from the very hard lessons of the last year and recognize fully the inextricable link between climate, health, and equity. And then we need to plan and implement accordingly. It is not enough for us to say the right things. It is really time for us to do the right things. So toward that end, I would like to ask EEA to please include in the text of the final document the recommendations that were voted on by the IAC, which includes guiding principles that are referenced on a page of the document. I can't recall exactly what page at this moment, as well as climate justice considerations. Please include those in the final report document, as opposed to just linking to them as a footnote in the document. I think they're a very important point to start the conversation. Thank you so much. The work that you all are doing is tremendously appreciated, and I thank you for the time.
Thank you. I'm going to go next to Rosemary. I have just given you permission to talk. So you should be able to unmute yourself, Rosemary.
Thank you so much. My name is Rosemary Wessel. I'm with Berkshire Environmental Action Team, and the CECP is a program that outlines how to reduce fossil fuel use from our current emission levels. Not enough, in our opinion. We do support the comments of others who say we need to be more aggressive, but it doesn't address not adding the new fossil fuels that are slated to be added in the immediate future. There are currently proposed projects before the DPU and other regulatory permitting agencies, including a new peaker power plant in Peabody that would run on oil, an LNG facility in Charlton, pipeline expansions by Eversource, and of course the biomass power plant near Springfield that are under consideration right now. There needs to be an immediate halt of these projects or an accounting of these projects in the plan. We need to commit us even more to reducing emissions that are currently coming online right now. I hope that accounting is being taken into account, but we really need provisions in place to stop from adding more emissions before, while we're waiting for this to be approved. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I'm going to go next to Mike Duclos. I've just given you permission to talk, and I'll also just note that we are nearing time. We only have a couple of hands left, so I think we're going to try to stick with it and hear everybody out, but please do remember to keep your comments brief. And Mike, it looks like you're still muted on your end. Oh, there you go.
Okay, can you hear me, Claire?
Yep.
Great, thanks very much. Thank you for the opportunity to comment on the tremendous amount of work that has gone into the 2030 CECP. This is an impressive effort which has surfaced some challenges when implementation details are considered for some key components. The challenge of thermal enclosure improvements and heating electrification, which I'll call retrofits, of 1 million homes by 2030 is about 400 homes each weekday for the next 10 years. A compelling public education program should be initiated soon, since it will take some time for the message to be understood, discussed, and accepted by the public before retrofits can be realized at scale. Large-scale retrofit workforce training is needed. Heat pump equipment cost and availability should be addressed by a supply chain management program, such as developed in Vermont. Strategies to address the wide variety of home designs, maintenance approaches, and heating and cooling distribution systems should be developed in consultation with the implementers, thermal enclosure specialists, and HVAC installers. Compelling incentives to entice massive numbers of homeowners, renters in multi-unit buildings, low income, moderate income, as need to be designed, financed, and implemented. The CECP heating fuel emissions cap program must be designed, implemented, and operate for long enough that the fuel price impact is visible to homeowners as current fuel prices, which will be a critical part of the value proposition used to sell retrofits to the public. To be sure all of the above components necessary to sell retrofits at scale are available in time, we may have to think differently. We may need to consider a rapid deployment model scheduled by starting at 2030 and working backwards in time to determine the date at which each of the key components outlined above must be in place to deliver the 2030 emissions reduction in time. At the very least, the next CECP should include a strawman project timeline with implementation deadlines for all key components to assess the feasibility of the CECP as written, and so we can track progress over time. Finally, the actual energy use must be monitored to confirm the anticipated emission reductions are realized, so corrective action can be taken in time to meet the 2030 goal. Thanks very much for the extraordinary effort that has gone into the CECP and for the opportunity to comment.
Great, thank you, Mike. I'm going to go to Edward Wool. Edward, you should have permission. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. Thank you for putting on this very, very helpful and educational program. My comment is focused on the 1 million heat pumps. And my concern is that there are probably over 500,000 dwellings in Massachusetts of the 3 million in the state that have old wiring and no insulation. And in order to use a heat pump, you need to upgrade that 16-amp knob and tube wiring to 100 amps. And most of those dwellings are going to be in low-income, frontline, or environmental justice communities, and many of those are rentals. So the issue becomes, of course, that a house that's uninsulated in those communities uses 3 times as much energy as an ordinary insulating house. So those 500,000 dwellings are equivalent to 1.5 million regular dwellings, and that seems to be the low-hanging fruit, and those need to be financed. So it suggests that the administration is committed to financing that conversion of those homes already by proposing the conversion to them to 1 million heat pumps. And I see you're using partly the Mass Save programs, but it'd be nice to go ahead and outline the other means by which you'll finance those conversions, because that's the low-hanging fruit. And if you don't finance them and convert those first, you'll leave the burden of the gas system, the cost of the gas system, on those low-income, frontline, and environmental justice communities. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Edward. I'm going now to Bill Green. I've just given you permissions, and then we have John and Michael remaining on the list as we go into overtime, but go ahead, Bill. Oh, it looks like it's clear. Bill, are you able to speak? Okay, we will come back to you. I'm going to go to John now. Go ahead, John.
Hi, thank you. My name is John Bonaparte. I'm a United Steelworkers Union representative. I represent probably about, well, the steelworkers represent 2,000 people employed with gas utilities in the state of Massachusetts. I wanted to speak to workforce development and protection, but after really taking a look at the plan, I kind of wanted to speak about the plan itself and make some comments. So a couple of the previous commenters talked about thermal districts and biofuels and the how they weren't really addressed in the plan. Along with that, I don't think a lot of types of energy where the existing pipeline could be utilized, things like hydrogen and RNG, they weren't addressed. And I think it's a mistake. I think if you look at the end use type pathways that the plan prescribes for building and transportation, they rely almost exclusively on electrification. The goals are really beyond reality. They're very costly, as one of the previous callers just mentioned. I think 1 million conversions over the next 10 years, and I'm guessing another 20 million for the next 20 years after that. It's going to cost a lot of people a lot of money. It's going to land on working people that are going to have a hard time being able to do that. We need a diverse energy portfolio that includes all types of energies that are available, and that includes gas. When it comes to worker development and protection, these climate plans do not address what happens to the workforce and the employees as the plan evolves. That's a mistake. You really need to come up with a concrete way to address this. The recent climate bill, I think, prescribes like $12 million for the Mass Clean Energy Technology Center to disperse for workforce development. It's not going to cut it. And I really hope the powers to be take another look at it. So thank you for the time to speak.
Thank you, John. I'm going to try again for Bill Green. Bill, are you able to speak? All right. Unfortunately, it looks good on our end, but we cannot hear you. We'll try one more time, but for now, I'm going to go to Michael. I have just given you permission to speak. Michael, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Claire. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Thanks. My name is Michael Ferrante. I represent the Mass Energy Marketers Association. I'm also a non-voting member of the Mass DOER's Energy Efficiency Advisory Council. Our trade association represents the heating oil industry. Our members serve about 800,000 customers statewide with heating oil and renewable liquid biofuel, which is a blend of heating oil and clean biofuels made from various feedstocks, also known as biodiesel, bioheat. It's important to note here that many also deliver propane and electric heat technologies. On that technology, I'll be submitting more extensive comments, but I want to be on the record tonight with a couple of comments. The heating oil industry, as you heard from a couple of other speakers, is committed to the state's effort to alter the impact of climate change. We've proven that we have a drop-in and immediate remedy for reducing carbon emissions and contributing to these efforts with renewable liquid heating fuel or heating oil blended with biodiesel. He recognizes fuel in the renewable fuel standard as advanced biofuels. And the Mass DOER's program, APS program, which you heard earlier from one of our speakers, launched in 2018, incentivizes biofuel blends in heating oil, is proof that this renewable fuel is currently reducing CO2e emissions in Mass by billions of pounds. The 2030 draft plan, quite frankly, doesn't recognize this fuel's use as a transition fuel to net zero, and it should. So we asked that the plan incorporates biofuels as a key component in reducing GHG emissions, and that EOEEA reinstate the 2008 law, an act relative to clean energy biofuels. That law was the first statute in the US to mandate the blending of renewable advanced biofuels for both home heating oil and on-road diesel. That law was never implemented and should be reinstated immediately. Under Secretary Chang in last week's session spoke of considering, quote, all clean heating solutions, and that climate change action, quote, just can't wait. The biofuel mandate is your pathway, plain and simple. Finally, our association wants to voice very strong opposition to the climate plan's support, eliminating mass save rebates and zero interest heat loans for customers seeking financial assistance to replace their older heating system with new high efficiency heating systems. In brief, this effort by Mass DOER is wrong. The attempt to use electric ratepayer efficiency funds to erode the heating oil industry by limiting this program is really simply wrong, and Mass DOER and EOEA are overstepping their authority with these recommendations in our view. It's a restraint of trade and a misuse of electric ratepayer funds. And quite honestly, you're endeavoring to remove a customer's choice to choose a heating source for their family and their home. So those recommendations in closing are unfair and I believe discriminatory, and will have a significant impact on low and moderate income households and the environmental justice community. Thank you again for the opportunity to speak tonight, and we look forward to submitting written comments.
Thank you, Michael. So I'm going to try once more for Bill Green, and let's see, Bill. All right, unfortunately, we cannot hear you. But just a reminder to everyone to please submit written comments if you would have anything additional that you'd like to add. They are due on Monday at 5 p.m. the 22nd, and that website is mass.gov/2030 CECP. I'll pass it back to Undersecretary Chang to close us out.
Thank you very much, everyone, for participating and spending the time to think about your comments and then delivering it tonight. Thank you very much, everyone. And I hope that not only have you reviewed the report, but also heard each other. And I very much appreciate all of your efforts. Thank you very much. And we look forward to written comments next week.
Và chúng
Thank
tôi
you.
sẽ trông mong tới những cái lời góp ý trên mạng của quý vị nữa. Cảm ơn quý vị rất nhiều.